Hello, this is Sunil Hazari from the Department of Marketing. In this presentation, I wanted to share with you my experience with virtual compassion in online courses. The idea for this presentation came about as we went through spring semester of last year. Then I taught courses in summer and fall, and I noticed a change. Students were not as engaged as they were beginning of January. So I did a study and looked at other literature as to why this was happening, or was it only my course. And I found out that other faculty members were also having the same issues. So looking into it much deeper, I decided to explore some ways in which I can engage students more in online courses. And this is what the presentation is about. I'll share with you some of the strategies that I have been using that relates to kindness and compassion that has really engaged my students in the courses. So here is the agenda that we will cover in the next 10 minutes. The first, we will look at what is compassion, what are the different types of compassions, and as a researcher, I looked at what has been written about compassion, because that would help inform my teaching. And based on that, I developed some templates and tools that I would like to share with you. And towards the end, I would like to present my findings of what I have done during the past year that has led to positive outcomes in this course, in the courses that I'm teaching. Now let's look at the word compassion first. When I was doing a review of literature, I found that there were very many alternate terms also used. So when I typed in compassion in the databases, I got articles that related to kindness and empathy also. So then I expanded my search and used those keywords in finding additional articles which were very helpful. But these three terms, which I'm going to use interchangeably in the semester, in the presentation, these three terms that I'm going to use in the presentation are synonymous, as you will see. So these are the textbook definitions or the dictionary definitions of compassion. The first one is compassion itself, which is concern for misfortunes of others. The second one is kindness, which is the act of being generous and considerate. And the third one related to compassion is empathy, which is being able to share the feelings of another. So by looking at these three definitions, you would agree that there is a relation between these terms. And that is why the articles that I found were so much using these terms interchangeably, because all of these constructs are tied together. So why compassion? Why do we need compassion? Again, going back to the story of last spring semester, my courses I've been teaching for 20 years, and I have a syllabus and a schedule that I use, and I stick to the schedule in the syllabus as much as possible. When I look at my evaluations, one of the things that keeps coming up is student comments about expectations were clear. So I rarely ever deviate from the schedule that is published. Of course, there are extenuating circumstances, either as a whole, for example, what happened during the pandemic, or in individual cases. But I try to stick to the schedule as much as possible, and that's just to be fair to all students. But then, because of what happened last March, I found out that students were either not participating, they were not turning in assignments, and even the good students. So I figured something had to be done. And to reach out, I decided to create what is called a compassionate classroom. So what that does is it helps humanize the online environment more. So in leadership, there is a model that looks at tasks on one end and people skills on the other. So in my case, most of my courses were task-based. There was very little human emotion, reaching out to students, finding out what they were doing, because this was an online course. And as some of you who've taught online courses, you may be aware that it's difficult to reach out to students. We do not want to seem intrusive or We don't want to impinge on their privacy, so we try to stick to business as usual and send emails that are related to the task expectations without having to know the human side of students. So what Compassion does is it creates a more welcoming environment in the classroom. And there have been many studies done that show that attrition in classrooms is mostly because of loneliness. And this is more so when everyone is online and everyone is trying to reach out and do the assignments without getting much feedback from other students, or in some cases even the instructor. So I was proactive in reaching out to students, sending email, posting video announcements, and I'll share some of the specific techniques that I used. The goal was again to show empathy and to make a connection. And by doing that, I was hoping that my behavior would be something of a role model for students to do in other classes, as well as when they are in positions of leadership. I've been at UWG for almost 18 years now. And when I first came, I taught a course, a graduate level course, which I taught for about 12 years. And in that course, we looked at maybe 10 different models of leadership. The two models that apply most to this presentation is the difference between transactional leadership and transformational leadership. In the past, my teaching style has been transactional. So what you will see that in a transactional leadership style, what is focused on is rewards and punishment. So a student comes in, submits an assignment, we give them a grade. If they do well, they get a higher grade, which is a reward. If they don't do well, then it's a punishment with a lower grade. So that's a transaction that goes on between the instructor and the student. We try to avoid change and keep things status quo as much as possible, because we are more concerned with the processes and the rubrics so that all students have the same playing field. But in contrast, there is something called transformational leadership. What this does is it acknowledges individuality and it acknowledges individual accomplishments. So I started recognizing students who had done well, getting their permission and sharing their work with class, so that there are clear expectations on how an assignment was graded. I encourage sharing of ideas. I encourage working in pairs, working in groups, because it just helped students reach out and connect with each other. So as you can see, the focus in transformational leadership is more about ideas, creativity, openness, rather than strict compliance with processes. So that was a change that I made, going from transactional leadership, the way of teaching classes, into transformational leadership, which on its core has compassion, kindness, and empathy, the constructs we talked about, as a driving force to go through class and reach out to students. So when I looked at the review of literature, I found many articles. I'm going to quickly share 5 articles. It says that kindness and compassion, if you want to implement in the classroom, it's not cost prohibitive. So you really don't need to do anything extra. It's just part of the pedagogy that you will see. The benefits are long-term. These researchers found that kindness is integral to forming and maintaining social relationships, which help with a healthy and flourishing human life. There was a nursing study done, and this was interesting. They found out that patients are more responsive to feeling as human beings when nurses reached out and just wished them good morning. So this was a very interesting study and an interesting paper. Then the next one says that by doing acts of kindness, what we are doing, it just doesn't end there. Students will pay it forward. And I still remember when I was doing my doctorate or in graduate school, there were some faculty member who were really kind. And I still remember to this day, they just made that extra accommodation, which I started doing since last year. And finally, it talks about teaching philosophy guided by a pedagogy of kindness, which will influence lives, enhance social consciousness, and provide meaningful learning. So again, this is just a snapshot of articles that I found which were very important in helping me tailor my activities and my communication with students by using compassion. Over time, I have developed templates because the same type of issues keep coming up. There's students who have been diagnosed with COVID. There have students who have contracted different type of illnesses. There's been death in the family. There have been work pressures. There have been stresses with other classes. So I have just developed paragraphs of templates that I keep reusing in addition to personalizing those paragraphs so that you reach out and make a one-on-one connection. Beginning of every week, I do video announcements, and I've also used feedback in when giving feedback to students in Course10. There is a button over there that lets you not only enter the score but also enter audio feedback. And again, I'm running short of time over here, and I'm just going to go through the highlights, but feel free to pause the screen to read some of the students' comments that I have received since last year. For example, this student says, "You have no idea how much it means to me to have a professor who actually cares about the success of the students." And this is by some of the ideas that I use for compassion in reaching out to the students. The second one was just this past month, April 6th, where the student thanks me, and it says it was something that I have never experienced before. And it wasn't anything great. I did not go out of the way. I just reached across to the student and asked them if they were doing okay. And that was the key in the student understanding and realizing that there is someone on the other end who not only sends email but actually cares about us. And this was course evaluation for fall. It says over here the professor reached out in my comments for a grade. It says the professor is looking to make you a better student. And in 20 years of teaching, I've never seen this comment before. It says the professor is very polite and kind. So it just helps me reevaluate and rethink the different types of teaching styles we have, and of course how there is always room for improvement. And the final slide, what did I learn over the past year? I found that it is best to reach out early to connect to students. You show concern about their assignments, show concern about what is going on in their lives, and just try to reach out. In some cases, you may never get a response, but even if you make a difference with one student, it really helps. Try to motivate struggling students because they are the ones that need help the most. And the earlier you reach out to them, the more are the chances that they will be able to get back on track. One thing I learned is use feedback not as a transaction but as a transformation. So other than the score, reach out, give a feedback, ask them how the assignment was, ask them if they have any problems in the past or going forward. It just helps them create an environment of support. And this is very useful as we go through the semester. Always be positive and respectful. This is common sense. We do this most of the time, but at times we ourselves are stressed. So it is hard for us to be positive, but at the back of our mind, know there's a human being at the other end, and it is good to show kindness and empathy. Use personalized feedback. I always start my emails with hello and the first name of the student. What that does is personalizes every communication, and it helps establish a connection. The 3 magic words that I learned from last year are for students who are not doing well. Just use these 3 words as the closing statement. are things, okay, you will be surprised as to the number of students who have reached out by just reading that and saying thank you so much for asking how I was doing. So please take this just as a holistic picture. Of course, your teaching style may be different from mine, but I have realized that yes, compassion, kindness, empathy does make a difference, can make a difference in the online classroom. And to end, the other day I went to drop my son off at the park, and guess what I saw? A car with a sticker, kindness matters. This is so true, and it sums up the entire presentation in 2 words. Thank you very much for listening to my presentations. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Thank you.